Hello friends and welcome to Noble Literature classes. Now I want you to watch all these final lectures again and again, like all these 4 or 5 lectures on modernism and postmodernism. Not because they are difficult, but because these lectures they'll give you so much new information, new data, which you'll not understand. Like in order to retain all that information, you have to watch them again and again. So, in the previous lecture, we saw how the theories of Freud, Darwin, Marx, and Nietzsche laid the groundwork for modernism. In this lecture, we'll look at a very important branch of modernism, which is structuralism. So, we'll start by tracing the birth of structuralism in the linguistic studies of Ferdinand de Saussure. Then we'll see the development in the literary studies of Roland Barthes, the development of these structuralism, and then we'll see the full flowering of this theory in the historical studies of Michel Foucault. And while we study this development of structuralism, I'll keep explaining all the complex terms and phenomena used by these structuralists. So just like modernism, structuralism also inverts and decenters those pre-established binaries, and it also prefers the structure over logocentric meaning. So these are the works which we'll be doing in this lecture. Course in General Linguistics 1913 by Ferdinand de Saussure, then Structuralist Activity by Roland Barthes, and Truth and Power by Michel Foucault. Now, many of you might think that the new critics are also structuralist as they focus on the structure of the poem. Like they also focus on the poem. So, therefore, you might think that they focus on the structure of the poem. But no, they do not focus on the structure. I'll explain it to you. Because when structuralists use the word structure, they mean something much more materialistic, something much more physical. You can relate it with Karl Marx when he said that economy is the base or structure. So structuralists are saying that structure determines all the physical and empirical things in our lives and not some inaccessible logocentric meaning or any idea. So that is why we can say that new critics are not structuralist. Please remember this thing. I'll prove it to you right now. There is a famous phrase by a Canadian philosopher, Marshall McLuhan. He says that the medium is the message. So McLuhan studied media theories for many years, and when he says that the medium is the message, he means that we should not focus much on that meaning of that message, but we should focus on the medium through which that message is conveyed to us. It is like when you hear a news, the more important thing is not the news, but the structure of that medium through which that news is given to us or conveyed to us, whether it could be a news channel or a newspaper or any kind of news media. For example, if Zee News is reporting to me that students of India are happy about the new education policy, like everybody is happy, then I must consider the basic structure of Zee News before believing any news that they tell me. So the focus is on the basic structure of that medium and not that message itself. Now you must have realized how new critics were always focused on the message. They were always trying to decode those works, those texts, and the structuralists are focused on the structure of the message, the basic medium of that message. Okay, so that is the basic difference, and therefore we can say they are different from new critics. Now, after decentering or inverting those binaries, structuralism re-hierarchizes those structures in order to create new, fresh viewpoints or new systems. First, let me explain the hierarchy concept. Hierarchy is when you rank something from top to bottom. Okay. It could be something most powerful to least powerful, or something most important to least important. So structuralists actually re-hierarchize those structures, uh, and therefore we can say that this system of structuralism is not limited to any specific branch of studies, because it can be applied to all the branches, and we can say that it is interdisciplinary field, and therefore we can apply it to history, psychology, philosophy, anthropology, literature, linguistics, We are doing it in literature right now, or even maths and science. So structuralists find structures everywhere, and their structures are so systematic that if you follow their structures properly, then they can answer all kinds of problems. For example, we were talking about Z News a few seconds ago. So if I'm looking for authentic news, I might not prefer them so much. But if I'm looking to buy shares of a company or any media house for say, then I'll definitely consider investing in Z News, because I know that the structure of this organization is very systematic, very organized. In fact, so systematic and organized that no matter what kind of political party comes in the power, they'll always find a way to manipulate their news in order to please those powerful people or those power holders and keep their company afloat in any kind of situation. Therefore, the structure of Z News, I'll say, is very good if we take it in terms of capitalism. And not just Z News, I'm not referring to a specific company, I'm just telling you in general, okay? So it can be any organization, any systematic structure. It could be a Marxist state, a fascist government, a religious organization, or even an entire religion also. Everything is based on structures. So here is a little suggestion for all those young revolutionaries who are watching this video. If you want to bring down some outdated or corrupt political party or organization or any kind of structure like that, then you must have another systematic structure which is already there and which you will replace it with. Or you can say you have to give an alternative to the people if you are going to replace something. Then you must start thinking in terms of structures. You must build another structure if you want to destroy one. So now let's come back to our lecture. I got carried away. Structuralism originated in the linguistic studies of Ferdinand de Saussure and the anthropological works of Claude Lévi-Strauss. Later, it was adopted to literature by Roman Jakobson and Roland Barthes. And finally, Michel Foucault used it in history. So there are so many fields where it has been used and it can be used, and we can keep talking about all that, but that will ruin the purpose of this lecture. So in this lecture, I'll only talk about Saussure, Barthes, and Foucault or Foucault. Now, so Ferdinand de Saussure, he was a Swiss linguist born in Switzerland in 1857 and lived up till 1913. And according to him, no ready-made ideas exist without words, and a word does not mean or does not unite a thing with a name. It unites a concept in our mind with a sound image that we make or that is made towards us. Okay, now I'll give you an example over here. The letters TREE or the sound tree is the signifier, and what it signifies, like the image or the concept of a tree, that is the signified. And when you combine a signifier and a signified, it forms a sign. So the word tree is a sign, this tree, it is a sign, and the sound tree which I am making right now, which you are listening to, it is a signifier, and the object with branches, that is the signified. So next he says that the relationship between signifier and signified is arbitrary, because if it were not so, then there would be only one language in the world, but we have so many languages. Therefore, the relationship between signifier and signified is arbitrary. What it means is that all the signifiers and signified can have so many different combinations and can mean so many different things. Therefore, every sign or idea which emerges from the union of these signifiers and signifieds is a man-made thing. But Saussure here does not care about all these signs. He is a structuralist. He is focused on that structure which is created by combining these various signs, this combination of various signs or systems. So each sign is part of a greater system of signs which ultimately creates our language. This language that I'm speaking to you, it is a combination of all these various signs. And he believes that this system of language lies even deeper than our thoughts, because we can't think if we can't really think anything if we don't have anything to say, if we don't have all these signs to think about. So Saussure calls this system of languages as langue, and then differentiates it from parole, which is a specific moment when we are speaking or writing. So parole is when I am speaking or giving a lecture, or when you are writing or making notes. That is parole. That moment is called parole. And langue is this entire system of language. So Saussure believes that these structures are created in two directions, vertically and horizontally. Now pay attention and remember what I speak here. He says uh, that vertical meaning is paradigmatic, associative, and synchronic. Now, paradigm means the way we think, okay, and association means to connect something with something else. So, paradigmatic and associative means relating to why that sign was chosen instead of some other sign or some other synonym. And vertical meaning is also synchronic, which means relating to how that sign interacts with the existing structure. So, vertical meaning is paradigmatic, associative, and synchronic. Similarly, horizontal meaning is syntagmatic and diachronic. Syntagmatic and diachronic. I'm sorry, it has to be diachronic. I forgot to change it. Now, syntagmatic means how the sign functions in terms of the syntax and grammar of that system. So, that is the syntagmatic, because we need to know if there will be subject, object, verb, or if in one language there can be subject, verb, object. So, these are various syntaxes in which languages are written. And that is why we say that horizontal meaning is syntagmatic or diachronic. So it is basically that uh, it is the evolution of these structures, we can simply say that. I'll give you a better example here by just see this table over here. When I say that you like partying, I can refer to you either as your name, or either as your name which is used at home, or I can also call you in a style which was used by Shakespeare's in those days, like thou, or I can call you as the son of your mother, or as an English student, or as a teacher if you are a teacher. Or I can also replace all these words with some other words. Therefore, all these vertical structures I'm talking about, that is how Saussure classified these things in vertical structures and in horizontal structures. So, vertical structure, I am repeating it again, it can be paradigmatic, associative, and synchronic, whereas the horizontal structure, which talks about the evolution of a thing throughout the history, throughout the time, it can be syntagmatic and diachronic. Now, the meaning arises from differences. The meaning of each sign arises from the differences that set it apart from other signs in that same given system. And unlike the Romantics, who used to prefer imagination over reason, these structuralists prefer reason over imagination, because reason helps in finding these differences between these signs. So we can say that if Romantics preferred imagination, then structuralists prefer reason over imagination, or we can say analysis over synthesis, or also that fission over fusion. And also these structuralists, therefore, they say that all our systems of politics, religion, education, etc., they are created by us only, or the society, or the entire race of humanity, and it does not originate from any logos or any heaven. Finally, structuralism destroys our old faith in purity, in the purity, in the integrity, and in the eternity of this meaning which the logocentrics kept searching all their lives. For example, first Plato believed in gods. He believed that uh, this absolute meaning exists in some form in those heavens, and that this meaning or these ideas, they are timeless, eternal. Then epistemologists like Immanuel Kant came in. Although they abandoned the old faith of Plato, but they replaced it with another faith which promised the existence of that timeless meaning in the subjective mind. So again, they were again searching for the meaning. And then came the new critics who, in order to disapprove these epistemological, romantic, or the Platonian critics, based their faith in another system, in the text only. And they thought that every meaning lies in the text only, but still they could not get rid of that meaning. But Saussure's theories of arbitrariness of language disrupted and destroyed even that feeble, that small petty faith. He proved that absolute meaning does not lie even in the language itself, because even that is a man made concept. And so that is how Saussure and all the later structuralists began this idea of total meaninglessness. And you must have heard about the theater of absurd. So there was this idea of total absurdity of life, or as we can say, the death of meaning. The meaning is dead. Earlier, if you remember, Nietzsche said that God is dead. Now, Saussure says that the meaning is dead. And we'll talk more on this in the next lecture, but for now, let's move on to our next theorist. Roland Barthes and Michel Foucault adapted this concept to the study of poetry and history. For Barthes, not only language but man himself is a structural being. So, treading on the footstep of Nietzsche, Barthes is also trying to understand the human process by which men give meaning to things. He does not care what things mean, he only wants to know how those things mean, like whatever they mean. So he says that man is not born with meaning, he creates it and fabricates it, just like the other structuralists have said it. And therefore, the structuralist activity, now the structuralist activity was a famous article which he published in 1964. He says that the structuralist activity comprehends a work not by finding hidden meanings but by dissecting and recomposing, or you can say articulating, the original works in accordance with the man made and the culture made rules of association. Therefore, we can say that a work of art does not exist within a structure, it only functions within a structure. That was it. Now, let's move on to Michel Foucault. So, as the name suggests, Michel Foucault was a French philosopher, a historian of ideas, as it's written in the Wikipedia articles. Now, historian of ideas, can you see this term over here? Historian of ideas, what do you think is the meaning? Somebody who collects ideas, who keeps them and creates a structure of ideas through the course of time. And can you realize now which method is he using for doing this structuralism? He's using the horizontal method or the diachronic method. Now, while most structuralists like Barthes and Saussure are trying to freeze the system and trying to study the structure synchronically, or you can say vertically, Foucault, just like Karl Marx, prefers to study the system with a diachronic approach, or we can say horizontal approach. And he combines three aspects of modernism. Number one, Barth's synchronic method to dissect and articulate all thought within the boundaries of a system. Number two aspect is Karl Marx's diachronic view of history as a class struggle, and also his materialistic view of structure and and superstructure. Now, Marx believed that man moves from one economic system to another. Now, these same things he also took from him. The third aspect is the Nietzsche's concerns with power or hegemony, and also the origins or the ancestry of words like truth and knowledge. Now, you remember how Nietzsche rebuked all those old concepts of absolute truth and absolute knowledge, which all the logocentric thinkers talked about. So Foucault is also including those aspects of Nietzsche in his structuralism, in his structuralist approach. And do remember this term genealogy, it's an important term, might be asked somewhere. and also how it is linked to hegemony, Nietzsche's concept of hegemony. Also, although it was the concept of Antonio Gramsci, but it came from the ideas of Nietzsche. Now, let's come back to Foucault. Therefore, we can say, after looking at all these three aspects of modernism and combining them, we can put it in a single sentence and we can come to what is Foucault's method. And therefore, we can say that Foucault's method is to dissect and articulate historical events within a structure, and that structure is not based on the structure of meaning but on the structure of power, which was the concept of Nietzsche. Or you can also say that within that structure, we are not looking at the archetypal universe of meaning as used to see Mr. Northrop Frye, but we are looking at a network of power, a power network which is spread across our history. So, according to Foucault, this power network forms a structure, a discourse, or you can also call it a debate. And this debate decides what can be thought or said at any given moment in the history of humanity or in our history. So we can say that truth is only a product of the discourse or this structure and not the other way around. Like, do not consider truth as the source of our discourse or our structures or our society or our world that we live in. Now, when I say discourse, please remember that I mean all those topics which are being debated or which have been being debated in a culture during history. Do remember the information written about Foucault, that he is a historian of ideas. He is a collector of ideas and analyzer of them. So, when this discourse changes or the structure changes, so does the truth. And now sometimes I wonder that Indian politics is stuck on the same discourse even after 73 years of our independence, because our politicians, like, they are still debating over the petty issues of roti, kapda or makan even after these 73 years of independence. It's an indication for me, according to me, that our power structure is still under the command or control of some foreign or maybe Western powers. I don't understand why people are so afraid to lose that power and give it to the people. So let us come back to Foucault. As this discourse changes, the truth inside a structure also changes. I've written it. But we should not think of this discourse in some negative way, like something which is manipulating us or restricting us. In fact, we must look at it as positive, something productive. And a productive network, you can call it, which is useful for this society. For example, if you look at the discourse of a modern democratic country like America, that discourse or that structure says that all the expert authorities or even the presidents can be wrong, but the people must always be right. This is the greatness, or this is the best thing about these structures or these changing structures. Now, feminist structuralists also, for example, can give similar example. Like in the medieval times, when female medicine practitioners were considered witches and they were burned to death or they were hanged in front of public, all those kinds of things were truth for those peoples. That was the discourse of that time, and everybody trusted that belief until the discourse changed, and recently only, when feminist people, they fought against all these stereotypes and all those atrocities. So to sum it all up, we can say that Foucault discovered many of these complex webs of various structures which were hidden deep beneath our society and which actually controlled our society, our nation, our religions, or simply we can say which controlled our lives. So friends, that was all about structuralism which I could tell you. And I hope you liked this lecture. If you did, please give a thumbs up to this video. And if there are any doubts or curiosities or questions that you might have for me, please leave them in the comments down below. Thank you and have a very nice day.